Kia ora koutou. We are looking at the elasticity of demand today. Now, this is a really important concept. It comes under the Achievement Standard 3.1, which is the efficiency of market equilibrium external, as well as the 3.3 microeconomic concept internal. So, super important that you understand it and that you can apply it to questions. So for a start, elasticity just means responsiveness. So we're looking at how responsive consumers or producers are to different factors that change. Okay, mainly prices, but we also look at incomes, how incomes change. So the first type of elasticity of demand that we're looking at is the price elasticity of demand. So price elasticity of demand just measures how responsive consumers are to a change in price. So how responsive their quantity demanded will be to a change in price. Now, we know with the law of demand that any increase in the price will always lead to a decrease in the quantity demanded, obviously, because the good becomes less affordable. But for different products, we will have different degrees of responsiveness, so how responsive consumers will decrease their quantity demanded from basically very responsive, which is elastic, to not very responsive, which would be inelastic. So inelastic demand basically means that there would be a less than proportional decrease in the quantity demanded. Okay, so not very responsive. So for example, if the price increased by 10%, the quantity demand would fall by anything less than 10%, so 5%. Okay, unitary demand is essentially when the increase in the price will cause the same proportional decrease in the quantity demanded. So if price went up by 10%, the quantity demanded decreases by 10%. And the elastic demand is where we will have a proportionately larger decrease in the quantity demanded. So if there's an increase in 10%, the quantity demand would decrease by more than the 10%, so for example, 15%. So this brings us to our demand curve. So different elasticities will have different demand curves. The flat demand curve, which shows a relative elastic demand, whereas the steep demand curve shows a relative inelastic demand. Now, the word proportionate, so proportionally larger or proportionally smaller, is very important when you are explaining the responsiveness of consumers to the price change. Okay, so that is why that's highlighted. It's super important. We've got two special cases as well. We've got perfect inelastic demand and perfect elastic demand. So inelastic demand, we've got a vertical demand curve, and the elastic demand, we've got a horizontal demand curve. Essentially, the inelastic demand would be usually for products that no matter what the price, consumers have to buy them. So for example, life-saving drugs, okay, they have to buy them essentially to stay alive. So it doesn't matter how the price changes, you're still going to buy that product. Whereas elastic demand usually it comes under a market situation which we call perfect competition, where if we change the price of our product, it would bring about basically no consumers will want to buy it. Okay, so if one firm increases the price above the other firms, then they're going to lose their quantity demanded for that product. So it brings about an infinite response in quantity demanded. Essentially, demand curves actually change the elasticity along the demand curve. So the top half is usually elastic, middle unitary, and then the bottom half is inelastic. Right, we have three different methods to calculate elasticity. So we're going to look at all three, and we will find coefficients, so a number, from these calculations. So these numbers will essentially tell us if their product's inelastic, elastic, or unitary. So if our coefficient is equal to 0, this means it's perfectly inelastic, so it brings about no change in the quantity. If it is less than 1, it means that the demand is inelastic, which means that we've had a less than proportionate decrease in the quantity. If it's equal to 1, it's unitary. If it is greater than 1, it's elastic, so the consumers are very responsive to the price change. And if it's infinity, then it's perfectly elastic. We don't usually have questions on the two extremes, the perfectly inelastic and elastic, so don't worry too much about those two. So here's our first method of calculations, the percentage change. So the percentage change method is where we do the percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Now remember, the percentage change formula is the change divided by the original amount times 100. So here's our example. If a price increases from 20 to 22, and the quantity demanded falls from 150 to 120, calculate the price elasticity. So for a start, we need to do the price percentage change in quantity demanded. So to do the percentage change in quantity demanded, we will go the change, which is 30 essentially. So 30 divided by the original amount, which was 150, times 100 to change it to percentage is 20. Then we do the same for the percentage change in price. So the change in the price was 2, so essentially 2, divided by the original price, which was 20, times 100 gives us 10%. Then we can put those two numbers into the formula. So our formula is the percentage change in the quantity divided by the percentage change in the price. So percentage change in quantity is 20, so 20 divided by percentage change in price is 10. 20 divided by 10 is 2. And we know that if the coefficient is greater than 1, then the good must be elastic. So this good has the consumers have a very responsive change in their quantity demand to the price. The midpoint formula essentially is this. It looks a wee bit different in textbooks, but it will calculate the same if you use this formula. So we've essentially got the change in the quantity on top. Remember, triangle just means change, divided by the original quantity plus the new, times the original price plus the new price divided by the change in the price. So we're using the same example. So this time we've got the change in the quantity, which is 30, divided by the old plus the new quantity, times the old plus the new price divided by the change in the price. And it's 2.33. So we get the same answer, that this good is elastic. The midpoint formula can only be used if we are given both prices and quantities though. Now notice that we haven't taken into account negatives, because essentially our coefficients for price elasticity of demand is always negative. When the price goes up, the quantity demanded always goes down. So we don't worry about negatives for price elasticity of demand, because essentially they're always negative, but we do later on when we look at incoming cross elasticity, so keep that in mind. Just a wee tip to remember the formulas. You Q before you P, so both formulas have the change in Q first, so hopefully that will help you remember it. Now the other method is the revenue method. So depending on how revenue changes when the prices change will tell us about the elasticity of demand for the product. Remember, revenue is price times quantity sold. So we're going to look at an example. So we've got 3 different products, elastic, unitary, and inelastic demand, and they all currently have the same price and quantity. So essentially the revenue for each of the 3 goods is the same. It's 30 times 40, right? The price of 30 and the selling 40. Right, so the current revenue is 1,200. If we increase the price for each of the goods, so we're going to increase, that's our revenue given by the area, the blue area. If we increase the price for all of the goods by 10, we're going to see the responsiveness of the price change for each good will be different, okay? Because we know that elastic, we're going to be very responsive, and inelastic, not very responsive. We're going to show it on a graph. So elastic, we've increased the price by 10. We can see that the quantity has fallen by proportionally more. Price increased by 10 and the quantity fell by more than the price increase. So a new revenue will be 40 times 20, which ends up only being 800. So when it's an elastic demand, when the price goes up, the revenue will fall. For the inelastic, we're going to increase the price by 10 and the quantity will fall by 10. Okay, and essentially we still have the same amount of revenue, so it remains the same at 1,240 times 30. And the last one, the inelastic, when the price increases by 10, the quantity demanded will fall by proportionately less. It's had a smaller change in the quantity demanded to the increase in the price. So therefore, our revenue has now increased. We're going to go 40 times 35, and that's 1,400. Yep. So when the price goes up and the revenue goes up, this must mean we have inelastic demand. And of course, the other way works as well. So it's basically if the price goes down for inelastic demand, then the revenue will go down. For elastic, if the price goes down, the revenue will go up. Now, elastic goods have a few characteristics that make them elastic. So they have lots of substitutes. So the reason that consumers are very responsive to the price change is that essentially they can just go buy other substitutes so they're more affordable. Okay, so those change to something else. Elastic goods are usually luxuries. Now, this is because that consumers don't essentially need them. Luxuries are kind of like a treat. So if the price of luxury goods go up, it makes them become less affordable for consumers, and they will switch away from consuming luxury goods. Luxury goods are also quite expensive, so you'd spend a high percentage of your income on these types of goods, which therefore makes you more responsive to the price change. And the last one is durable. So elastic goods are usually durable, which means they're long lasting. This is because if the price changes, so let's say new cars become a lot more expensive, you won't replace your old one. You'll just keep driving around your old one, because why buy the new one? Your old one still works and you haven't used it up. Well, inelastic is essentially the opposite. So inelastic goods will be a necessity. So necessities are things that we must have to survive, or usually basic needs. So like electricity, or it could be basic transport, or goods like bread and milk. Consumers usually have to have them to survive. So a necessity, you're not going to be responsive to the price change. They don't have many close substitutes, so therefore you essentially have to buy the product. So air travel in New Zealand, we've only got Air New Zealand and Jetstar, so we don't have many options of what airline you have to take. So essentially that's why our prices are quite high for these. If you have a small percentage of income that you spend on it, so if it's something quite cheap, then you will not really realize, you'll not notice the price change, so therefore you're not responsive to the price change. If it's addictive, then of course you're going to want to buy it regardless of the price change, and you'll just decrease your consumption of something else. If the government makes it compulsory, then of course you have to have it, otherwise you'll get a fine. So consumers still need to get warranted fitnesses even if they go up in price. And non-durable, so they're used up. So if you essentially use petrol, then it's not available for someone else to use, and you can't use it tomorrow. Okay, so you have to keep purchasing these goods because they're used up. So the last thing that we can apply with the price elasticity of demand is that if producers know the type of elasticity for their product, then they can figure out their pricing decisions to help create more revenue and therefore profit. So for example, if a bus company knows a good has inelastic demand, then of course they should increase their price and they'll get a higher revenue, because we know with inelastic demand, consumers are not very responsive to the price change. So any increase in the price leads to a less than proportional decrease in the quantity demanded, which would cause an overall increase in revenue. We also can use this with price discrimination. So producers can essentially discriminate prices and try and get the most amount of profit out of their product. So for example, during high peak time, so 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 4:30 to 6, when people are going to and from work, is essentially when we have very high demand for bus transport. So therefore, producers can charge a higher price during these times, because essentially people need it. They need to get to and from work, and they'll charge lower prices during the off-peak time. So they're discriminating between their prices. Here's some other real-life examples. So air travel, you've noticed when you go on a plane and you're trying to go during the week, during business hours, it's usually super expensive. It's also really expensive during school holidays, because this is when essentially they have really high demand for their for their service, so they are going to charge higher prices. Power companies do it for the first 100 units of electricity consumed, because essentially that is a necessity, a basic amount that most people use, and then after that they charge a lower rate. Okay, so you become more elastic with your demand for electricity past the 100 units essentially. Coupons and discounts. So if you are a consumer that is very sensitive to price changes, so if you have an elastic demand, then you're going to spend the time to collect up coupons and use your discount cards, okay, because you're more willing to try and save your money. Whereas a consumer that potentially could be more high income won't be as price sensitive to prices of products, so they won't spend their time trying to get the coupons and use their discount cards. They're usually going to be the ones that forget about their discount cards. We can also discriminate using ages. So we know that if you're a student usually, or if you are over 65, then you usually have a lower income than people that are full-time working. So what producers do is they use this to the advantage, and they start using just student discounts and super gold cards for people over 65, because they are usually going to have an elastic demand for products because their incomes are lower. So they are more sensitive to price changes. So essentially they're lowering the price for these people so that their quantity demand will increase by proportionately more. So hopefully this has helped you understand price elasticity of demand. We will look at income and cross elasticity of demand the next couple of videos. So